Well, greetings, vinyl community, and welcome to VC Friday for December 6th. Yes, there are still 19 shopping days left until Christmas, and yet people are doing vinyl tags already. Talk about rushing the season. I think, what happens if your favorite release of 2024 comes out next week? Then you'll be stuck. But it's also a Bandcamp Friday, so I will be doing some plugging later on in the video, but I'll do the good stuff first so you won't have to sit through it if you don't want to. The really good stuff that I have to talk to is some splendid VCLT from Pete, whose channel is Sounds from the West Coast. And that West Coast is not the one that I'm on here in California, but back in the northwest of England, where they sing Cumbria, my lord, Cumbria. And Pete contacted me because he had a spare copy of a Lard free album, and would I be interested? Well, I responded that A, I didn't have any Lard free on vinyl, and I'd love to, and B, I didn't know such a thing existed as the one he was offering, a Live in Brussels album. Now, Lard Free was the project of the French percussionist and keyboard player and all-around musician and composer Gilbert Hartmann, a real visionary of French avant-progressive music. And they made 3 albums in the 70s, I think through 1973 through 77. And then in the 90s, there was an archival release of some unissued tapes. And this album, though, Live in Brussels, is from a reconvened Lard free lineup that was done specially for this concert, as far as I can tell. I can't find out a lot of information about this. This is from 2009, and it includes a couple of past Lard free members, in addition to Gilbert Hartmann, as well as a couple of new people. And it is this album with the lovely little pink piggies on the front. Lard free. Oh, I'm holding it sideways. Lard Free Brussels Live. And this has a really nice sound world to it. Just unusual instrumental combinations with a lot happening on the low end. It's got 2 bass players, basically, and 2 people who at different times contribute bass clarinet. So we have Gilbert Hartmann on keyboards, drums, and bass clarinet. Philippe Bollier, one of the past Lard free members, on tenor and baritone sax, bass clarinet, and keyboards. Bernard Weber on bass guitar and electric contrabass, so that's an electric upright bass, as well as sitar. Xavier Bolloré, and he's another of the past members, on keyboards and guitar, and Anne Gouraud on contrabass, which is the acoustic upright bass, voice, and grenouilles, which means frogs. So apparently, you can see in the cover photos here, this sort of string of things. I believe those are little wooden or plastic frogs that feature in the track, which is unpronounceable, La Grenette et la Clarinouille, which is a switching around of the syllables of the French words for frog and clarinet. So this is the bass clarinet and the frogs, and you can hear the sort of clicking sound that I'm assuming comes from that string of little froggies. But this is very spacey, avant music. There's a lot of sounds that just drift along and being held together by some kind of repeating pattern. It's not a standard kind of jam where you've got a rhythm section holding down riffs while people jam out over it. It's more ethereal than that. It's pretty approachable avant-garde music. I would recommend it to people who don't want to hear something that's too noisy or oppressive. Lard Free was associated with Helden. Helden's main man, Richard Pinhas, was featured on one of Lard Free's albums as one of the main participants. But this is not the kind of oppressive sound world that you hear in a lot of Helden's music. It does get a little bit cacophonous on the second to last track, but it's still sweet enough to listen to for people who aren't really into hardcore noise music. And speaking of sweet, it does have some sweet female vocals, which is a different element from other Lard Free albums. So I was just super pleased with this, and thanks so much to Pete for sending it on. But that's not all. Not knowing when to leave well enough alone, Pete also sent me a second album, and it was one that was completely off my radar, never heard of this artist. The band is called Nepal, and that is spelled Nepal. And they are an improvising collective from Hungary. And this is an album called Black Batik 1. There is also a Black Batik 2, which has this same cover but in a different color scheme. And this is an improvisation from April 2021. And was recorded in the Psychedelic Source rehearsal room in Budapest by a lineup of 2 guitars, keyboards, and a bass and drums. And this is, to an extent, just what I was talking about when discussing Lard Free, where there is a rhythm section holding a pattern down that everybody else can jam over. So that's what's happening here. This is a very psychedelic, very stony. It's kind of in the vein of stoner music. Just deep and sludgy and mind-altering sounds. Great album. I love this sonically, and I love this visually because it's on this super cool black and yellow vinyl. I don't know if the yellow is really coming through. It doesn't look very good on my little camera monitor here, but I thought this was great. So Pete, you're 2 for 2. These albums are both just wonderful. Thank you. Good on ya. You done good. The next album I have to talk about is this 2022 release by Björk, Fossora. This is, to date, her most recent album, her 10th official studio album, not counting the early juvenilia. And if you count all the live albums and remix albums and soundtrack albums and whatnot, it's about her 893rd album, but this is the most recent, Fossora. The title is the feminine version of the word fossor, which means a grave digger. So this is an album which has the specter of death on it. It was recorded during COVID, and Björk had in mind the death of her mother in 2018, which is referred to in a couple of these songs here. This is a 2-record set, and it's one of those albums that was released on about 98 different colors of vinyl. So this is the turquoise edition. The album also has a theme of mushrooms, and mushrooms are sort of stylized in this fungus-related art, which is continued on the inside, on the inner sleeves, and so on, and in a monochrome version on the lyric booklet. Now, mushrooms, in one sense, continue the theme of death because they are organisms that feed on decay, that recycle chemicals from other dead organisms. On the other hand, it's a celebratory and colorful theme because mushrooms can provide psychedelic trips. I wouldn't know a lot about that, but they are delicious when sautéed with olive oil and some Italian seasoning. She doesn't really have any recipes, though, on the album. She does have clarinets on the album. We had bass clarinets on the Lard Free album. We have lots of clarinets of assorted registers on this album. She uses it as partly a theme, holding the sound world of this album together. Choirs of clarinets. There are other orchestral combinations. There is a leftover track from the sessions for her previous album, Utopia, which features a lot of flutes. And that's one of my favorite tracks on this album, so maybe I need to get Utopia. This is the only Björk album I have on vinyl. I have her Medulla album on CD. And this is, if anything, Medulla was kind of her first really, really weird album. And this definitely continues in that tradition. It's very avant. I think they're calling it avant pop, but I think it's more avant than pop. It's amazing that anything on here was considered for release as singles, but they did, and there you go. Presumably people buy it because it's great stuff. More of that fungus world, because there is indeed a fungus among us. I was aware of Björk back to the days of the Sugar Cubes. My wife had the Sugar Cubes albums, particularly Life's Too Good. I loved the song Deus from that. So that's sort of the roots of this stuff. That's where it was in the pop world. This is in a world, I think, entirely in Björk's own mind, and rightly so.
When you're out of time, how you look back changes. Did you punish us for leaving? Are you sure we hurt you? Was it just good living?
So because it is Bandcamp Friday, I would like to once again invite you, or urge you, or threaten and cajole and plead with you to visit my Bandcamp page and have a listen to my own music, and hopefully the urge will come upon you to buy. And in order to provoke that buying response, I'd like to do a little bit of a deep dive into one of my own albums, and I've selected the 2017 release Paleozoic, which is a theme album concerned with ancient life, not necessarily restricted to the Paleozoic age, but just in general. The theme is displayed in this wonderful cover art by the Minnesota artist Mike Manasco. I also have a poster print of this artwork. He did a great job. I kind of had in mind the images of the ancient seas that I saw in my books on dinosaurs and life on the early Earth that I had in childhood. On the back cover, that is a photograph of a fossil trilobite from my own small collection of fossils. And here the guy is. That is a Sauroras from the Ordovician period, and this guy was found in Canada. Another trilobite that might have some slight relevance is this guy from the Devonian period in Morocco, and this is called a Coltrania. So the album is divided into two halves, side one being the more active music with elements of prog rock and jazz, and the side two is music that is more ambient and becomes progressively more so and less active as the side goes on. The first track on the album is Extinction Event, which is a sound picture of the Earth awaiting the impact of the meteor that ended the age of the dinosaurs. Some of the tracks on the album are partially or even entirely created on apps, synthesizer apps for the iPod Touch or iPad. And the second track is one of those, Herrings and Ingrids, which was created using an app on the iPod Touch, maybe touched up a little in the digital audio workstation after the fact in order to get it on the album. Is a portrait of that scaly fellow from the ancient Earth, and a very imposing piece of music that is to illustrate that kind of scary guy. The Heaven Tree of Stars is a melody that I'm quite proud of, and it's one that I'd had around in an unfinished form for quite some time before finally working it out in the form that it appears here. And it's the most delicate thing on the album, and the title comes from James Joyce. The last track on side one is Bone Wars, and while I really enjoy the sort of surrealistic image that title might conjure up, it actually refers to a disgraceful period in the history of paleontology when rival scientists put personal aggrandizement ahead of actual scientific value and progress. Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Charles Marsh, I'm Looking at You, through the years. Side 2 begins with a couple of references to a more positive side of paleontology, with the Burgess Shale. The Burgess Shale being one of the most famous fossil sites on Earth, where just amazing discoveries were made, and types of animals that just had never been imagined before were discovered. And the music has kind of the sound of digging in it. That's followed by Carbon-14, which is a reference to the method of dating ancient artifacts, not the kind of ancient artifacts that I'm talking about elsewhere on the album, because Carbon-14 is only good for a few thousand years. So these are ancient artifacts in the history of man. And that's followed by Silurian Swamp, which is swampy. Crinoid Drift, which is just, we're getting really abstract here. It's starting to get really watery, going very far back, and drifting, as the crinoids may have done when they weren't stuck fast by their holdfasts to the substrate. Crinoids still exist in the form that we today call sea lilies. And finally, Precambrian, which goes way back to the very earliest life on Earth, the stuff that we had before the trilobites and the Burgess Shale, and the very mysterious and simple and very unknown regions of life. So there you go, another VC Friday come and gone. Please do, if you feel so inclined, check out my Bandcamp page on this Bandcamp Friday. And thank you very much for watching. Be well. I will talk with you again soon. Bye-bye for now.